Now let's plant this thing. Here's the container plant. We'll set it in here. Now there's absolutely no reason to take this thing out of the container too early. You do not want those roots to be out in the air any longer than they have to be. So we can see, eyeballing it, that we're pretty good on depth. That is, that some of the soil that's spilled back in, and where we have the soil level here is about even with the soil level of the surrounding landscape. Now that should be a little bit higher because with time and water it will settle. So we're going to take it back out and put a little of our backfill into the bottom of the hole, and we're going to create a little crown, a little mound in the bottom of the hole. And it's good here to somewhat compact this so that it won't settle more than what you have in mind. You can see that we've got some pretty spongy soil down here because of the water that we added. So once we know that this is fairly well compacted, we can measure again, and now we have our 10-inch level, which is the depth of the root ball, slightly higher, just the width of this pick handle, higher than the surrounding grade, which is just perfect. Now, the nursery containers, these plastic containers, are tapered. Never pull on the plant from the trunk to dislodge it. Always hold it in your hand and knock it out. This one has a bit of a stubborn streak, but we see here how the roots are beautifully formed inside this root ball. It's not a root bound plant, it's well grown, and we can take the little corner here and give the root ball a gentle massage. This is not cutting it with a knife, this is not slicing it with your shovel, rolling it around on the ground and stomping on it. This is gentle, just to get some of these roots to find their way out, away from the root ball. They will. This is a fast-growing, vigorous plant, and it will find its way. Now, if you forget everything else about the video, remember, leaves up, roots down. So then we find which is the front of the landscape, or the face, and we situate the plant in such a way that it will be attractive from the viewing spot. Just gently spill in some of your backfill around the root ball. Poke this in. If you want to wear gloves, that's probably a good idea. And get this somewhat compacted. Now, remember we said we're never going to plant dry. We're always going to plant with water. So at this stage, all this beautifully loosened backfill can be moistened. We want soft rain nozzle. Do not just use your thumb over the end of the hose, and do not use a strong stream from the hose. That compacts the soil. You want to always use soft rain. And also, I failed to mention that the root ball of the plant should not be dry on the day of the planting either. So this plant was well watered. So we break up these big clods, and the idea here is to have good contact and moist soil between the root ball and the surrounding soil. Now we're going to start to build our watering basin around the outside of the hole, and I mean outside of the hole, not at the hole dimension. But what we're doing here now is building a basin that will catch rainwater and irrigation water from sprinklers, if any, and will also be a place to apply water by hand for the first couple seasons that the plant is in. You'll note that I'm putting more backfill on the slight slope here, the downhill side, and I only need a little bit up at the top because I want to take advantage of the site and allow natural rainfall to drain into this basin. So this now has become our watering basin. We see too much of the root ball there, so I need more soil in the actual planting hole. Don't want to see that much of the root ball sticking up. I don't want to see any of the root ball, but quite frankly, I want to see that it is high by about an inch, and then the basin has a place for water to collect. Then the berm outside the basin. So you imagine the crown, this is the crown of the plant. You can imagine the crown being never really saturated with water, never sitting for a very long time in standing water, because it's higher than the rest of the basin. And then if you really want this thing to get established on its own and never give you any problems, you're going to dig this secondary basin out here. Call it a moat, call it a donut, I don't know what you want to call it. But it's a double basin. And this goes outside the watering basin, and you can build a second little berm out beyond. So we've got this nice double basin built with most of the berm emphasis on the downhill side. We've got our tight right. Finish it off. So, how deep is the water? It's beneath the hole. It's in the deep soils all around and beneath the hole. We're adding water to that little bit on top that was moist only when we put it in. It was never bone dry, never plant dry. See how the water runs away from the crown into this basin. No water running to the plant. And now we soak this basin. By the way, you can firm up the loose soil here with just a little moisture. It kind of cements it. And now we can fill this basin with water, which will saturate down into the soil beneath. And I'm sure just by looking at this 5-gallon plant that has a basin around it, which is almost 5 feet, 4.5 feet in diameter, you would say that's an overkill. Well, I would say we're planting a plant that's going to become self-sufficient, completely sustainable and functional in the first season. And it's all about getting those roots out into a big root zone outside the old root ball from the container. High crown, watering basin, berm, secondary basin. Can firm up this little berm that we planted, or that we built outside the moat, the donut, the trench, the secondary basin. And we absolutely are positive that every bit of the soil around this root ball, down to a very deep level, is saturated. So, what we have done is properly planted a 5-gallon pitcher sage, Lepidopteronia fragrans, in the shade, in some beautiful soil, and you see how easy it is. Have fun with your planting, and remember this, don't skimp on the hole. Dig a good hole.